Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to Jazz Chats with Cool Cats, a virtual conversation concert series featuring esteemed drummer and host, KCH favorite and yours, Pete Siers. This series has been generously funded by seasoned underwriter, Bank of Ann Arbor. This presentation is free, but please consider supporting our world-class artists and our Kerrytown Concert House by making your own gift at kerrytownconcerthouse.com/donate. Enjoy the program.
Thanks, everybody. And we want to welcome our special guest on Jazz Chats, Robert Hurst, on the bass extraordinaire.
All right. Thank you.
And I'd also like to introduce everybody to the coordinator of development here at Kerrytown Concert House. And this is Kenji Lee, everybody. In the musical community, you may have heard Kenji. He's a graduate of the University of Michigan and player extraordinaire for sure, and is kind of like coming back to set up some roots here. And really happy to have you involved in the concert house and all the inner workings here. So, and as you can hear, he's a monster. And so we are really lucky to have him. So reach out and say hello. Make him feel welcome for those of you that have not met him yet, because we're all lucky, everybody. All right. Yeah. So can I call you Bob?
Please.
I have been a fan for many, many years before I even had a chance to meet you. Because you're a Michigander. I think you were born in Detroit. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you lived in Grand Rapids for some time and
A couple years.
Began stretching your wings over there and coming back and moving to Rochester, I believe, going to high school in Rochester, Michigan.
I did.
So let's talk about your early life. Bob has done so many things as a musician that it's easy to get distracted, but I want to kind of organize it in terms of like how you came up and what really affected you in terms of like hearing music in general, but of course jazz, and like how that affected you, because you were obviously drawn to it at an early age. And improvising just became like part of, that's who you are, you know. So let's just take it from the beginning. So in Detroit, did you play in elementary school? Were you in band, or how did that all fall together?
Playing, I started playing guitar when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. And I have to say, like, my early development is all because of my father's immaculate record collection, and he's from Mississippi, but he grew up in Detroit, and he had an aunt, his mother's sister, that lived right across the street from Barry Harris on Stanford Street, and so he heard like all this amazing music happening at Barry's place, because he was kind of like the town crier, the town educator, and still is.
That's right.
Still an amazing player, and how he codifies the music to pass it on to the next generation is amazing. And so my father grew up around there, and he saw like all these great musicians come through there. And he also grew up, went to elementary school with Charles McPherson, as well as two guys from the Temptations, Melvin Franklin and Richard Street. And so his love of the music, you know, transferred to me. But I started playing the guitar at 7 years old with I'm an only child, but I have two older male cousins, and one younger male cousin, and we all got a guitar after we went and saw the Jackson 5 at the Olympia back in the day. So that was my inspiration, was originally Tito Jackson, but then I started playing the bass, and then Jermaine Jackson was my dude, even though I didn't realize at that time that it was actually James Jamerson playing the bass on those records. But the early Motown influence was everything for me.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I mean that was pop. Anytime you put on the radio, which it was probably always on, at least at my house, that's what you heard. Yeah. Right on. Were you taking lessons at that point?
So when I started playing guitar, where we lived, we were on the northwest side of Detroit. My father got me my first guitar and amp from this place, M Studio, on the northwest side of Detroit, owned and operated by a black entrepreneur. But at the time, Earl Clue was the guitar teacher. So I had my first few lessons with Earl Clue. And in that neighborhood also, we lived not too far from Baker's Keyboard Lounge. And Earl kind of would play there a lot, and I would stick my head in I couldn't go all the way into the back part where you could sit down, but I could, if I didn't stand at the bar, I could hang out, So that was like one of our big places that we hung as well. My father could talk me in, he could get me in, and then when I was a little older than that, probably 8 or 9 years old, we took my father on Father's Day to hear the Modern Jazz Quartet at Baker's Keyboard Lounge. That was his favorite group. Miles Davis, all Miles's groups, and then the Modern Jazz Quartet were my father's go-to. So I remember sitting, in front of the stage. It was a Sunday matinee, so I could come into the main part of the club, and I remember sitting this close to Percy Heath and just hearing him play. And he came out and talked to me, told me about his bass, that it was like this, 300-year-old Italian Ruggieri bass, was amazing. I was just mystified. And from then on, I kind of wanted to play the bass, Yeah.
Wow, that makes really great sense. But you were unknowingly in a hot seat, like, being around all these really, really great musicians, either that were living there or coming through town.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
so, wow. And that, obviously, it was the next thing to just like, if you were going to gravitate toward it, you had all the pieces right there in front of you. So did you get an acoustic bass, or were you playing electric?
I started on originally guitar, and then I broke the top 2 strings on my guitar, and the lower 4 strings are the same as the bass, except octave higher. So I started taking bass lessons on that instrument from this neighborhood guy that taught out by Northland at the music store out there. And that was my first, exposure to that. Then we moved to Grand Rapids when I was in the 5th grade. And then it was like a whole socialization thing, moving from Detroit, which was all black, to, the outskirts of Grand Rapids, which was all not black, So, I spent a lot of time, like, as an only child, just like really practicing. And I got lessons with a great bass teacher, Mike Grace, that was living there at the time, and he's since moved to Ann Arbor, and then now he's in Canada. But he had a great program here at Community High School, just a stone's throw from where we are right now. And he was an amazing teacher, and he pointed me in the right direction, and didn't allow me to develop too many bad habits and all that stuff.
The name Mike Grace, well, for me personally, I went to Aquinas where he was teaching.
Oh, wow. That's where I took bass lessons.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
That's where I went to school, and they had a really great jazz program that Mike helped bolster with Dr. Bruce Early, and I'm a product of that school.
Oh, that's so cool, man.
So when I heard that name, and of course, he started the jazz program at Community High School, so that name resonates with lots and lots of really just everyday people and a lot of really great musicians that came through his program. So, what a really interesting guy, and just right from the get-go was thinking outside of the box in terms of like jazz education.
Yes,
Both he and Bruce Early were like pioneers on that edge.
Right.
So that's fantastic. Were you playing any gigs at all early on?
Not till I got I was just in the Grand Rapids for a couple of years, like from age 9 to maybe 11. And then we moved back to, because my father's job, he worked for the Michigan Bell Telephone Company, so his job was moving around at that time, quite a bit. So we moved back to the Detroit area, and a lot of the schools in Detroit didn't have music at that time, or sports. I played basketball as well. And like where we wanted to move, I would have gone to Mumford, and they didn't have a program at the time, and so we ended up moving to Rochester, Michigan, which was great experience and great music program, great school program there that really kept me on the right track, and that's where I started. They had a jazz band for credit, like the second period, like from 7th grade all the way till I graduated, from high school. We had jazz band for credit, and like I had a bass from the school that I could play, and that was great. So we had lots of really good musicians, and I started playing gigs with people from our jazz band and doing things. And then when I got to high school, around the age of 15, that's where Marcus Belgrave came out and did a clinic at my school. And we connected, and he got a chance to hear me play, and he asked my parents, for their blessing to come out and do some gigs and stuff in the summer. And then that just really put everything, in forward motion for me.
Right. Yeah. Before we talk about Marcus a little bit and his influence, but did you study with Dick Goldsworthy in Rochester in that program? Because he was also a pioneer of jazz education.
Yeah, that's so. Hearing you say these names, because those people meant that to me. But to hear you say it, it really resonates, because I think I was really blessed in my experience. But actually, the first bass that I bought from Dick Goldsworthy.
Oh my gosh!
I got from Dick Goldsworthy, and he didn't teach at my school. He taught at the Adams. Okay. I went to Rochester High School, but he taught at Adams. But we all played together, but he had this old bass, and like the bass was okay, but the neck had come off, and somebody put the neck back on with Bondo that you use for cars, so it was like, so it was like just one thing, and it still worked and everything, but you couldn't make any adjustments. It was just there, so. It's at my mom's house in South Carolina, but that's the first gigs that I started playing with Marcus was on this horrible bass, man. It was not a horrible bass, but it was a horrible repair,
So Dick Goldsworthy, we were both on the faculty at Blue Lake, and I was his roommate.
Oh, get out of here!
Yeah, so we lived together. That's how I got to know him. And really interesting guy, but he was on the edge of that jazz education, and he believed in it. He lived it,
he did.
Real interesting guy. Let's talk about Marcus for a minute, because Marcus also touched my life as well. He just had a way of, without saying a lot, like to teach you by just how he played, how he ran the band on the stand, how he kept you, how he would lead without even playing, through his proximity perhaps, or little things that he would say, or just like, but it was always propelling the music forward.
Always.
And it kind of shone a really clear light about how the Detroit School of Jazz operated, which was different than like East Coast or West Coast. Mm-hmm. Because you were in the middle of that, coming up in your teens, and really starting to push, could you speak to like what that Detroit school is? And
yeah, wow, that's a you took a turn. You gave me a curveball, but I think it's some in dealing with some people talking about it going back. I think the Detroit school is very much a product of the migration from the South that happened in the 1930s, where people were leaving the South and the oppressive nature of the South at that time, and coming to where there was they could flourish and have jobs and different things. So I think by the time, things happen by the time we get to the 50s, people are, black people have access to working in the auto industry, and lots of people in my family did that, as well as teaching. Many of the women in my family were teachers and nurses and things. So they had the means to buy their children instruments. And I think that was like one of the big things that happened in the 50s. And I think like in Detroit, the school systems were amazing. Of course, Cass Tech was the prototype, but Northwestern and King and all of these other schools were amazing with their programs. And there was a great tradition of great instrumentalists, from Detroit, and all these kids that had basements where they could practice, and basements where bands could rehearse, and that's like a whole thing of basement culture, basement music culture, and even my father, that wasn't a musician, he would get together once a week with his friends, and they would all bring their latest record. Everybody would bring their latest record, and they would just have and they were, because there was jazz, they were like, that's kind of like what underground hip hop is now, to people. It's like this obscure thing, but really cool, really considered cool. So, yeah, that's kind of how that germinated, and I think that tradition has stayed. And I think it's not just jazz; it's the whole gospel tradition from Detroit. Now it's the electronic music and hip hop. And in the 70s, when I was coming up, it was like a whole bunch of, rock and roll, Bob Seger and Ted Nugent, and before that, there was the punk scene. So it's like very, 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 I don't know what that is. There's some kind of magical element in there that allowed all of that stuff to coexist. Right.
I will have to say that you have done so many things. And you're known, at least in the circle that we're kind of floating in today, as a jazz bassist, jazz musician. But really, there's really no boundaries for you. It's just the way my perception of like how you take on the music is it's just music. What you got? Let's do that. Right. Let's do this. Or in a lot of your compositions that. I've heard in bands that you'll just bring in these other influences on just to twist it, and I think that so it's just let's play. It's kind of like that for you.
I think that's another thing with the Detroit tradition, because you have that melting pot, and all the guys that were on the Motown records were jazz musicians, So at night they would be doing certain things, and then I think. Now, at any jam session in Detroit, whether it's a jazz, whatever, you probably will play What's Going On or some Marvin Gaye or something, from that. So it all got it's all blended, and I think like that influence of that, and then the gospel musicians that were also playing jazz, I think that I realized very early on that there's great musicians from every genre, and I didn't grow up playing jazz. I mean, I came up playing Motown and Earth, Wind and Fire and Parliament Funkadelic, and I got into jazz a little, like in my teens, or preteens, going through my father's record collection, and I remember Herbie Hancock had the Headhunters. He had a big hit with Chameleon that was on all over black radio, not just jazz radio. It was on, it crossed over. And I saw that Herbie Hancock played with Miles Davis, and then Wayne Shorter from Weather Report, he played with Miles Davis too. And I saw like all these guys doing all these great things. So that was wonderful.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's talk about how you started to move on out of the city. So was this when you recorded with Out of the Blue, which was kind of like hand-picked all-stars, real of a certain age at that time, that were going to be big guns, and it was correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was a Columbia Records project?
Blue Note.
Oh, Blue Note, that's right. And so they put you guys out there, and you made a couple of really great records that were turning heads. And everybody from that pack became a leader of some sort and really proliferated, you know.
Yeah, that was great for me. I mean, I think around that same time, but probably in the early '80s, you know, Wynton Marsalis had great success, and his image as this young black dude in the suit, you know, very distinguished, you know, playing music from this tradition was really strong. So all the other record companies started trying to duplicate that and signing younger musicians, and yeah, it was really a blessing for me and kind of my introduction into the New York scene and you know, in some ways the international scene, but before that, you know, I after I graduated high school, the year after I did that, I went to Europe for the first time with Marcus and in a great band with Donald Walden and Jerry Allen was playing piano and you know Danny Spencer, great band, Vincent York, and when we got out there, we were like, you know, I heard like some of these cats, they not hitting as hard as we are, but that gave me like a perspective as far as like, man, we kind of doing it in Detroit. You know, our stuff is real here. So yeah, that was really my real introduction into like the international scene, and then the Out of the Blue thing kind of came out of that. Yeah.
And then shortly thereafter, you were with Wynton for quite a while, like 3-4 years, was that right?
Yeah, you know, 2 years plus, you know. And yeah, I got that connection was also through Marcus. We went to Pittsburgh to play with Jerry Allen. Actually, it was for her master's recital, and we did that, and it was like a gig, you know, an outdoor gig. And then she had a gig that night, and that's where I met Jeff Watts. And when I was young, I was like 16 or something, you know, and you know, when I went to school, you know, I kind of stayed in touch with Jeff, and I got a chance to, you know, meet Wynton and you know, get that connection with him. And I auditioned when I was a freshman in college, and then he offered me the gig, but I was too afraid. You know, maybe it was wisdom, maybe it was fear, I don't know, or both. But I stayed in school for a couple more years, and then I went with Wynton a couple years later. Yeah.
And so you went to Indiana.
Yes.
And the bass teacher there, I'm blanking on his name.
Stuart Sankey.
And Edgar Meyer was involved there.
He was.
Well, right?
We were both studying with Stuart Sankey, yeah.
Fantastic. So was it that road gigs took you away from staying there?
Yeah, you know, I started doing the OTB thing, and that kind of worked, you know. But then after my third year, that's when I started playing with Wynton, and I did it for a semester. But then there was like lots of there started to be conflicts, and they could have been more understanding. You know, I think if I was doing gigs with a classical organization of the same caliber, they would have been more understanding. But you know, it was you know, unfortunate that I didn't get a chance to do both things. You know. Yeah.
So the stint with Wynton, that was an amazing band, and I have to say one of my all-time favorite records is the Live at Blues Alley record. There's so much communication and spontaneity in that record that that's one of them. When, for me as a teacher, to hit my students to in terms of metric modulation and some new things that were not readily found on records that, you guys were pushing the envelope. It was just a really great period for jazz, I felt. And that band was like,
well, it was great. It was a great time for me. I mean, I was really like a sponge. And shout out to my man Jeff Tane Watts. Who should get way more credit. Even though he gets some, but he should get way more credit for being like a very important part of that time and a very important part of the sound that was that is still happening now. But like at that time, he hadn't started to do records as a leader, but he put a lot of energy into like the stuff that we did with Winton and Branford's band, a little later.
Right. So after this, your name was well known in the circles in terms of like being potentially available and ready to do some recordings, and this is when the list just goes on and on, starting with, well, Tony Williams, one of the great drummers of all time. Mm-hmm. Mulgrew Miller, Harry Connick, of course you mentioned Jerry Allen, and Russell Malone. Mm-hmm. Steve Coleman, and these records that were coming out at this period in terms of jazz history, they were a little bit different because they took the tradition and they were really pushing the envelope, in my humble opinion. And it was a new generation of energy that was like, you could tell the difference. And I think it really kind of pushed jazz into a new era. You were kind of right in there, Bob. It's really amazing, man.
I don't know. That's not for me to say.
No, I get it. And that's another thing that I have to say that I really appreciate you, of like just the humble nature of being subservient to what's necessary in the music and really being aware and not, how do I want to articulate this? Just like, all of the things that you've done, the 7 Grammys, right? Yeah. 4 Emmy Awards. I mean, huge amounts of output. However, when it comes time to play, that's all that matters. And it's just the humble nature of who you are and the music, understanding what's paramount. That's what the lesson that I learned in your presence, and try to learn from that. It's just like, okay, man, let's play.
In the words of the great Sam Jones, he said, "You're only as good as your last gig." Nobody cares about any of that. And it's just like in any, like if we're playing basketball tonight, nobody cares that LeBron James is the champion. They're going to try to, that means nothing. Yeah, I hear all the stuff that you're saying. All of that stuff really, hopefully it means something to club owners to increase my budget.
Yeah, so with all of that kind of behind you, now you're an educator, and you've distilled so much of this of what we know as modern jazz, and being able to relate that to students. And I have to say that you have really put out a lot of very fine students, and they just have a lot of, you've changed their lives in many ways. So,
hopefully for the better.
Right on.
Yeah. No, that is like one of the lessons that I got from certainly from Marcus Belgrave and also Winton, is that this is not going to take care of itself. You have to recycle. You can't just let it stay on the shelf and hope that it passes on, or you have to make an effort to do that. And I feel so blessed when I see somebody like Kenji, they used to come to my studio with my students, and he sounds amazing now, and and when I can you know, touch somebody's life like that, you know, that's the recycling. That's the circle of life, you know, kind of thing. You know.
Right. Well, in terms of the program here, we're really lucky to have you in our midst, and that was one of the reasons why I appreciate you coming on this show, and because there's a lot of people that support the concert house and have a deep compassion for what this is, because this, as you can hear the sound and hear, we're using microphones, but this is unusual because we're streaming. But it to me, you know, it's sacred space because it's not filtered, it's not through a PA or anything. Right. This is just raw, man. This is like as close as you can get to like letting your soul out, you know. So. And I want those people to know you, because I don't think they may have heard your name through records or, you know, but that's kind of like mythology, you know, but you're just like, with all due respect, you're just a normal guy that's just like really amazing. So, you know, thanks for coming out.
Oh, and man, it's such a pleasure to be in human contact, you know, by somebody that's not named Hurst, you know. It's great. It's great to see you, man. We played a really fun gig here a few years back, man. That I had and I have to say, man, I had never heard you play like that. I think we played something by Elvin Jones, man. I had never heard you go in that mode, man. I was like, oh, okay, all right, all right, man. So.
That was a really memorable gig for me because, you know, like. I'm calling Bob Hurst. I'm like trying, and it was you, me, Wes Anderson, and Wes announced that he's leaving town.
Right.
And I had played with Wes in Atlanta, and we became fast friends, man. He's just like really a fantastic person.
Warm daddy.
I know. And it's like you want to be around him. So when I heard that, I'm like, oh, we got to figure this out. And Tad Weed, the late Tad Weed was on that gig. That was
wonderful.
It was fun. So anyway, thank you so much for all you do for everybody. And as I said, I hope that the people that support the concert house can get to know Bob and let Bob make the house ring, you know. We need some more of that. Things are going to start to open up. So anyway, I want to invite you to bring some energy here and light the house up.
Most definitely.
Fantastic. So let's bring Kenji back and play a tune out. And thank you so much, Bob.
Oh, man, thank you, Pete. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you for joining us for Live at the 415 at Kerrytown Concert House. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter to read about our scheduled concerts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to be notified about our newest videos and upcoming live streams. Hope you'll join us again soon.